It is a cold October day in the year 2024. The camera captures the massive gates of the Huron Valley Women's Correctional Facility opening, releasing a woman of average height with prematurely gray hair. Marina Coleman squints in the bright sunlight, clutching a worn bag containing her few belongings, all she has left after 3 years in prison for aggravated assault. "I didn't think this day would ever come," Marina says, looking straight into the camera. Her voice is hoarse and her gaze wary. 3 years is enough for the world to change beyond recognition. Marina boards a bus that takes her to Detroit. Outside the window, cityscapes flash by, gradually changing from suburban areas to the familiar streets of her hometown. The former prisoner looks at the buildings rushing by with a slightly confused expression. "Detroit has always been a city of contrasts," comments the voiceover. For Marina, it is the city where she lost everything and the only place she can return to. We see Marina settling into temporary housing for former prisoners, a small room with shabby walls in the center of East Detroit. 10 other women live in the building with a leaky roof and unstable electricity, many of whom, like her, have recently been released from prison. "After prison, you have almost no choice," Marina explains as she unpacks her meager belongings. "They release you with minimal assistance and the expectation that you will somehow miraculously find a job, despite the stigma of a criminal record." The next day, we watch Marina look for work. She visits several snack bars, shops, and cleaning companies, but everywhere she is met with polite and sometimes not so polite refusals as soon as she mentions her status as a former prisoner. "The system is designed to punish you even after you've served your sentence," she says, sitting on a bench in a city park after another rejection. "Without money, without support, without a chance at a normal job, the only thing left to do is go back to what got you locked up in the first place." Marina is required to visit the probation office, where she is scheduled for regular meetings with an officer. There, she learns that she must undergo a medical examination, a standard procedure for those who have recently been released. In the hallway of the medical center for low-income citizens, Marina accidentally bumps into a young woman coming out of the office across the hall. Nervously fixing her hair, the woman hurries away, but Marina manages to catch a glimpse of her face. "It was Emily," Marina says quietly to the camera. "We used to live in the same neighborhood. She never really talked to me, but now there was fear in her eyes, as if I were some kind of monster." After the awkward encounter, Marina enters the office of social worker Alex Mitchell, a man in his mid-30s with tired but attentive eyes. "I've been working with ex-prisoners for 8 years, Alex says, as the camera captures him in a separate interview. Marina is one of many who have found themselves in a vicious cycle within the system, but there is a determination in her that I rarely see in others. Alex helps Marina sort through her paperwork and tells her about rehabilitation programs and support groups. He is the only one who looks at her without judgment or pity. "You can do it," he tells her, "but you need to leave the past in the past." In the evening, Marina sits in her room, looking through old photographs that she miraculously managed to keep. In one of them, she and a man with a broad smile are standing in front of an unfinished house. "Ryan always dreamed of building us a house," Marina says, running her finger over the photo. "We were so young and full of hope." The next day, passing by a construction site in a developing neighborhood of Detroit, Marina stops in her tracks. A large billboard displays the name of the company, Coleman Construction, and a photo of her ex-husband, Ryan Coleman. "A successful business built on honesty and trust," she reads the slogan aloud, her face contorted into a bitter smile. From a conversation with a former neighbor, Marina learns that Ryan remarried shortly after their divorce and her arrest. His new wife, Emily, the woman she met at the medical center, has given birth to his daughter. Now they live in the prestigious Grosse Pointe neighborhood, and his construction company is thriving. "He always knew how to get out of trouble," Marina says, watching from a distance as Ryan, dressed in an expensive suit, explains something to the workers at the construction site. "And I always paid for our mistakes." At the end of her first week of freedom, Marina returns to the medical center for a mandatory examination. Alex meets her in the hallway. "How are you doing?" he asks. "Surviving day by day," Marina replies. "But sometimes I think prison was easier. At least the rules were clear there." Alex nods understandingly. Freedom is a responsibility that many people fear. But you have a chance to change everything, Marina. Don't miss it. The first chapter ends with a scene where Marina stands on a bridge over the Detroit River, looking at the Canadian shore. Her gaze reveals a mixture of longing, determination, and hidden pain. "I've lost 3 years of my life," she says, without turning to the camera. "And I want to know what for." Marina sits in the sterile white office of a Detroit city clinic, nervously tapping her fingers on the armrest of a plastic chair. 2 weeks have passed since she underwent a mandatory medical examination. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with a tired look in her eyes, reviews the test results, avoiding Marina's gaze. "We have your results, Miss Coleman," the doctor finally says, looking up. "I'm sorry, but you have tested positive for HIV." The camera captures Marina's face in close-up, first incomprehension, then shock, followed by a strange numbness. She sits motionless in her chair while the doctor explains the details of the diagnosis, treatment options, and prognosis. The words reach her as if through a thick layer of water. "That's impossible," Marina finally says, her voice sounding detached. "There must be a mistake." The doctor shakes his head. "We checked the results twice. The human immunodeficiency virus is present in your blood. But today, that's not a death sentence, Miss Coleman. With the right treatment, you can live a long and relatively healthy life." A voiceover comments, "Statistically, prisoners are 5 times more likely to be infected with HIV than the average American. For many, the diagnosis becomes yet another obstacle in their attempt to return to normal life." Marina leaves the clinic in a state of numbness. The camera follows her as she wanders aimlessly through the streets of Detroit, oblivious to the chilly November wind and the beginning rain. At one point, she stops in front of an electronics store window where a local news channel is broadcast on a multitude of screens. The story is about successful Detroit entrepreneurs, including Ryan Coleman, who smiles at the camera against the backdrop of a new residential complex. "Our company is proud to be helping to revitalize Detroit," Ryan says on screen. "We're not just building homes, we're building a future for our families." Marina's face freezes. "Our families," she repeats silently. That evening, Marina is in her room at the shelter for former prisoners. She sits on the edge of her bed, staring hypnotically at a bottle of cheap whiskey she bought on her way home. A sudden knock on the door snaps her out of her trance. Alex Mitchell is standing on the threshold. "The clinic told me about your results," he explains. "I thought you might need someone to talk to." Marina reluctantly lets him in, but the bottle of whiskey remains untouched. In a long conversation, shot in subdued light, Alex talks about support programs for HIV-positive people, modern treatment methods, and how a diagnosis is not the end of life. "I know how it sounds right now," he says, "but over time, you'll learn to live with it." "It's not that I can't live with it," Marina finally says, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. "It's where it came from." The next morning, Marina wakes up with a new determination. Denial has given way to anger, controlled but no less dangerous. She calls her former friend Jennifer, whom she hasn't spoken to since her arrest. They meet in a small cafe in western Detroit. Jennifer, a woman about Marina's age but looking much more well-groomed and prosperous, is clearly nervous. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," Jennifer admits, avoiding direct eye contact. "I need to know something about Ryan," Marina says without preamble. "Something he may have been hiding from me during our marriage." Jennifer tenses up. "It's been almost 4 years, Marina. Why stir up the past?" "Because the past just gave me HIV," Marina replies sharply. Her words hit Jennifer like a slap in the face. "Oh my God," she exhales. Then, after a long pause, I don't know for sure, but there were rumors. Even before your wedding. Someone from his former circle said he might have had health problems. But you loved him so much, and he seemed so sincere. You knew? Marina's voice rings with restrained rage. No, I mean they were just rumors. Jennifer looks frightened. A girl he dated before you hinted that he had passed something on to her. But no one specifically mentioned HIV. The camera captures the change in Marina's eyes. Something finally breaks inside her. At the same time, we see Ryan Coleman's life. A luxurious house in Grosse Pointe, a morning in a happy family. His wife Emily, a slender blonde in her 30s, is making breakfast, while their 5-year-old daughter Chloe sits at the kitchen island, coloring a coloring book. Ryan, dressed in an expensive suit, kisses them both goodbye before leaving for work. Daddy built us such a beautiful house, Chloe says, showing her drawing, which schematically depicts their house. Yes, sweetie, Emily smiles. Your dad has given us everything we could ever dream of. Ryan leaves the house, gets into his new SUV, and drives through the affluent neighborhoods of Detroit to his office, located in one of the recently renovated historic buildings. On the way, he talks on the phone with business partners, discussing new projects and investments. Everything about him radiates confidence and success. A voiceover comments, "In 4 years, Ryan Coleman has gone from being a small contractor to the owner of one of the fastest-growing construction companies in Detroit. His story is often cited as an example of the city's entrepreneurial revival. The contrast between Ryan's and Marina's lives is shown through parallel editing. While he is holding a meeting in a spacious office with panoramic windows, she is standing in line at social services. When he is having lunch at an expensive restaurant with clients, she is reheating cheap canned food on the stove in the shelter's communal kitchen. In the evening, he returns to the embrace of his loving family, while she sits alone, studying brochures about living with HIV. After meeting Jennifer, Marina begins her own investigation. She goes to the public library, where she uses a computer to search for information about her ex-husband. Social media, local news, business publications, all talk about his success and impeccable reputation. It's as if the past never existed, Marina mutters, as she looks through photos of a smiling Ryan with his new family at various charity events. In her search, she comes across information about a major charity evening in support of a Detroit children's hospital, where Ryan Coleman is listed as one of the main sponsors. The event is scheduled to take place in a week. That same evening, Marina returns to the medical center, where Alex is already waiting for her with the results of additional tests. From her conversation with the doctor, she learns that, judging by the state of her immune system, the infection did not occur during her imprisonment, but much earlier, possibly a year or two before her arrest. That means Marina doesn't finish the sentence, but her gaze speaks volumes. It means you need to focus on your treatment, not on finding someone to blame, Alex says gently. You can't change the past, Marina. No, she agrees, but a new frightening expression appears in her eyes. But I can stop him from destroying more lives. After her visit to the clinic, Marina goes to a job interview arranged for her by the probation service. A small household goods store is looking for a night watchman. The job is low-paying, but one of the few options for someone with a criminal record. The store owner, an elderly man with a suspicious look in his eyes, studies her documents at length. 3 years for assault, he says, shaking his head. Not very encouraging. I was defending myself, Marina replies, and I served my time. After a long pause, the owner agrees to take her on probation. One mistake and you're fired, he warns. This small victory should have made Marina happy, but her mind is already preoccupied with something else. On her way back from the interview, she drives past the construction site where Ryan's company is working. Stopping on the other side of the street, she watches her ex-husband talking to the workers, inspecting the progress of the construction, radiating energy and confidence. He looks so healthy, Marina says to the camera, as if nothing happened, as if he didn't destroy my life. At home, Marina takes an old photo out of her bag, her and Ryan on their wedding day, young and happy. Slowly, methodically, she tears the photo into small pieces. "When you get a diagnosis like that, you go through different stages," she says, looking at the scraps of her past. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. "I'm stuck in anger, and I think I'll stay there forever." In the final scene of the chapter, Marina sits in her room, carefully cutting out an article about an upcoming charity event that mentions Ryan Coleman. She pins the clipping to the wall next to the schedule of medications she has been prescribed to control her HIV infection. "You know what's ironic?" she asks, addressing an invisible interlocutor behind the camera. "If he had just confessed to me then, we could have dealt with it together. I loved him enough. But he chose to lie, and now the choice is mine." 2 weeks after receiving her diagnosis, Marina sits in her room at a shelter for former prisoners. On the wall is a makeshift investigation board, photos of Ryan cut out of newspapers, printouts from social media, notes about his family. The camera captures her face with an unhealthy gleam in her eyes as she adds new information, the work schedule of Coleman's construction company. "After 3 years in prison, I learned patience," Marina says, without taking her eyes off her notes. "It's like planning an escape. You have to know all the details, all the schedules, all the weak spots." In the next scene, we see Marina sitting in an old, beat-up sedan at a distance from an elite private school in the Grosse Pointe neighborhood. She watches as Emily brings little Chloe to class. Every day, Marina learns more about the family's routine. Ryan usually leaves for work at 7:30 a.m. and doesn't return until 8 p.m. Emily takes Chloe to school around 9, then goes to a yoga studio or meets friends at a cafe, picks up her daughter at 3 in the afternoon, and then they often go to the park or various activities. "They have such a predictable life," Marina comments, making notes in a small notebook. "So peaceful." The night shift at the hardware store gives Marina the perfect cover for daytime surveillance. She hardly sleeps, torn between work and surveillance, fueling herself with energy drinks and fast food. Her appearance deteriorates noticeably. Dark circles under her eyes, pale skin, nervous and jerky movements. A voiceover comments, "For people with traumatic pasts and serious diagnoses, the line between just retribution and destructive obsession can be frighteningly thin." In mid-December, Marina attends another doctor's appointment. Her physical condition is cause for concern. She has lost weight, and tests show a deterioration in her immune status. The doctor asks with concern whether she is taking her prescribed medications. "When I remember," Marina replies indifferently. "I have other priorities right now." After the appointment, she runs into Alex in the hallway. He immediately notices her exhausted appearance. "What's going on, Marina?" he asks bluntly. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." "Work," she replies curtly, avoiding his gaze. Alex doesn't believe her, but he doesn't press the issue. Instead, he invites her to lunch, a simple gesture that unexpectedly throws Marina off balance. She hasn't had a normal conversation with anyone in so long that she's almost forgotten how to do it. In a small cafe near the clinic, they talk about everyday things: the weather, the Christmas decorations in the city, books. For a brief moment, Marina seems almost like her old self, an intelligent, sarcastic woman with a lively mind and a sense of humor. "You don't have to go through this alone," Alex says as they leave the cafe. "There are support groups, therapy." "I'm not crazy," Marina cuts him off sharply, and the warmth of the moment disappears. "And I don't need witnesses." "Witnesses to what?" Alex asks cautiously. Marina freezes, realizing she has said too much. Nothing, just a slip of the tongue. The next day, Marina doesn't go to work. Instead, she drives to the suburbs of Detroit, to a small gun shop known for its lax approach to checking IDs. Her criminal record makes it impossible for her to legally purchase a weapon, but she has contacts from her prison past. After a brief conversation with the shop owner, an elderly man with tattoos on his knuckles, She leaves with a small package under her jacket. Back at the shelter, Marina locks herself in her room and unwraps the package. Inside is a pistol, used but in working order. She picks it up uncertainly, clearly inexperienced with handling weapons. "It's called the 38th Special," she says to the camera, holding the pistol in her open palm. "It's as if it were made especially for me." The day after buying the gun, Marina returns to the store with apologies for missing her shift. Her explanation, health problems, sounds convincing enough that the owner doesn't fire her on the spot, but warns her that one more absence like this, and she'll have to find another job. In the evening, Alex calls Marina. He was worried when he didn't see her at the clinic, where she was supposed to go to get her medication. His sincere concern makes her hesitate for a moment, but then she ends the conversation, saying she is tired. "I have to do this myself," she mutters after the call, looking at the photos of the Coleman family spread out in front of her. In the next episode, we see Marina practicing with a gun in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Her movements are clumsy, but she persistently repeats the same actions: reach, aim, pull the trigger. She has few bullets, so she saves each one. "There was a woman in prison who was a former soldier," Marina says off-screen. "She said that the most important thing is not to flinch at the last moment. If you decide to shoot, shoot without hesitation." As Christmas approaches, Marina becomes increasingly withdrawn. She hardly interacts with her neighbors at the shelter and ignores Alex's attempts to connect with her. All her time is consumed by watching the Coleman family and making plans. Her notebook fills with increasingly detailed notes. When the cleaning lady comes to the Coleman house, which days Ryan stays late at work, which clubs Chloe frequents. "Detroit transforms before Christmas," says the voiceover, as the camera shows the city's festive streets. Even the most disadvantaged neighborhoods are decorated with garlands and lights. This is a time when people strive to be with their families, when old wounds can heal or reopen. A week before Christmas, Marina, continuing her surveillance, witnesses a touching scene. Ryan, Emily, and Chloe are choosing a Christmas tree at the Christmas market. Chloe laughs as her father lifts her onto his shoulders so she can touch the top of the chosen tree. Emily takes pictures of them, and the whole scene exudes such happiness and warmth that even Marina catches her breath for a moment. "He doesn't deserve this," she whispers, clenching her hands into fists so tightly that her nails dig into her palms. "Not after what he did to me." That night, Marina is tormented by nightmares. Fragmented images from the past are replaced by scenes of violence. She wakes up in a cold sweat and sits in the dark for a long time, staring at the gun lying on the table. The next day, she doesn't go out to spy. Instead, she shows up at the clinic where Alex works. He is surprised by her visit, but glad to see her. Marina looks haggard, but calmer than she has been in recent weeks. "I wanted to apologize," she says. "You're trying to help, and I'm acting like this." Alex smiles. "Accepted. Want to talk?" They go to a small coffee shop near the clinic. Marina sips her coffee, choosing her words carefully. "When you get a diagnosis like that, you start thinking about how much time you have left," she finally says. "Not in terms of time. Modern medicine works wonders. But in terms of meaning. What will I have time to do? What will I leave behind?" "Many people feel the same way," Alex replies. "It's normal to reevaluate your life after news like that." "What if the only thing that makes sense is to right the wrongs that have been done to you?" Marina asks, watching Alex's reaction closely. He looks her straight in the eye. "Revenge doesn't heal, Marina. It only deepens the wound." "What about justice? Does it heal?" "Sometimes, if it's really justice, not just retribution." After this conversation, Marina seems pensive. She returns to watching the Coleman house, but now there is something new in her eyes. Not just anger, but doubt. On Christmas Eve, Marina watches the Coleman house, where a festive dinner is taking place. Through the windows, she can see the family and guests gathered around a large table, laughing and exchanging gifts. Ryan raises a glass for a toast, and everyone joins him. Marina sits in her car across the street, shivering from the cold and the emotions tearing her apart inside. She clutches a gun in her hand, but does not get out of the car. "I could do it now," she whispers. "Go in and end it all, but not with the child, not on Christmas." She starts the car and drives away, not noticing the neighbor who has noticed the suspicious car and written down the license plate number. On Christmas morning, Marina wakes up to the sound of the phone ringing. It's Alex, inviting her to lunch. Not a family dinner at home, just lunch at a cafe that is open on the holiday. "No one should be alone on Christmas," he says. Marina hesitates but agrees. Over lunch, they talk about their past, their families, their dreams. Alex explains why he chose to become a social worker. His brother died of an overdose, and he vowed to help people who had fallen by the wayside. Marina talks for the first time about her childhood in a dysfunctional family, about how she met Ryan, who seemed like her savior. "He was the first person who saw something worthwhile in me," she admits. "That's why the betrayal was so overwhelming." After lunch, they walk through the festive park, and for a moment Marina feels almost normal. But when Alex impulsively takes her hand, she pulls away. "I can't," she says. "Not now. Maybe never." "I understand," he replies. "Just know that you're not alone." Back in her room, Marina stares at the wall with photos of the Coleman family for a long time. Then she resolutely takes them all down, puts them in a metal trash can, and sets them on fire. The flames reflect in her eyes as she watches the past turn to ashes. But instead of feeling liberated, she feels only emptiness. After the fire dies down, Marina takes a new notebook out of the drawer and begins to write, more methodically, in greater detail. Now it's not just observations, but a plan. "There were times in prison when I thought I would never see freedom," she says, looking straight into the camera. "And there were moments of freedom when I thought I would never feel truly free. Now I understand that freedom is not a place, it is a decision." On the last day of December, we see Marina carefully preparing for something important. She tidies herself up, for the first time in a long time, dresses neatly, even applies light makeup. The camera shows her checking the gun, loading it, and hiding it in her coat pocket. Then Marina takes out her notebook and rereads the last entry. The address, the time, detailed instructions. Her hand does not tremble as she closes the notebook and puts it in her bag. "They say, how you spend New Year's Eve is how you'll spend the rest of the year," she says with a grim smile. "I'll spend it doing what I have to do." The final scene shows Marina leaving the shelter on a snowy evening. She walks confidently, with the determination of someone who has finally understood her purpose. A voiceover comments, "The line between justice and revenge is sometimes invisible. So is the line between forgiveness and surrender." On a cold New Year's Eve in Detroit, Marina Coleman crossed that line, unaware that there would be no turning back. January 1st, 2025. The camera slowly pans across the quiet, snow-covered neighborhood of Grosse Pointe. Holiday lights still twinkle on the houses, but the streets are deserted. Most residents are resting after the New Year's celebrations. Early twilight envelops the elegant mansions, among which the Coleman family home stands out, a modern 3-story building with panoramic windows and a well-kept garden. A voiceover comments, "On New Year's Eve, the line between the past and the future seems particularly thin. For the Coleman family, this night will be the last day of their former life." The Coleman house is quiet. Ryan is working in his home office on the second floor, reviewing documents for an important contract that is to be signed after the holidays. Emily is putting Chloe to bed on the third floor, reading her a fairy tale. It is an idyllic family scene, interrupted only by a faint shadow gliding along the fence. The camera captures the dark figure of Marina approaching the house from the back. She is dressed all in black, carrying a bag of tools. The small courtyard is empty. The housekeeper who lived in the annex has left to spend the holidays with her family. Marina enters through the back door, carefully picking the lock with tools she learned to use during recent training sessions. New Year's Eve is the perfect time for an attack, Marina whispers into a miniature microphone that the documentary filmmakers supposedly gave her earlier that evening. The police are overwhelmed with calls, the neighbors are celebrating loudly, no one will pay attention to strange noises. Inside the house, Marina moves cautiously, avoiding creaky floorboards. Her movements are mechanical, as if she has rehearsed each step many times. She clutches a gun in her right hand, confidently heading for the stairs to the second floor, where Ryan's study is located. A voiceover explains, "According to the subsequent investigation, Marina thoroughly studied the layout of the house using photographs from architectural magazines, where the Coleman's luxurious mansion was presented as a model of modern design." Marina climbs the stairs. From the nursery on the third floor, she hears the quiet voice of Emily reading a fairy tale. Marina pauses for a moment, listening, but then resolutely continues on her way to the study. The door to Ryan's study is ajar. He is sitting with his back to the entrance, completely absorbed in his work. Marina stands in the doorway, watching him for a few seconds. Her face shows no emotion, only cold determination. "Ryan," she finally says. He flinches and turns around, the confusion on his face giving way to shock and recognition. "Marina? What are you—" The sound of a gunshot breaks the silence of the house. Ryan falls, clutching his chest. Marina takes a step forward and fires 2 more shots. Each shot is accompanied by a flash that illuminates the room with a sharp light. On the third floor, Emily hears the shots. She instinctively grabs Chloe, covers her mouth with her hand, and drags her into the bathroom, locking the door. With trembling hands, she takes out her cell phone and dials 911. "Help," she whispers into the receiver. "There's been a shooting in our house. My husband. Oh my God, my husband is in the study." Meanwhile, Marina stands over Ryan's body, watching the life drain from his eyes. There is no satisfaction, no remorse, only a strange absence of emotion, as if she has completed a routine task. She puts the gun in her coat pocket and slowly walks out of the room, not caring about traces or fingerprints. As she descends the stairs, Marina hears quiet voices from the third floor and pauses for a moment. Her hand reaches for the gun again, but then drops. Police sirens can already be heard in the distance. One of the vigilant neighbors may have heard the shots, or perhaps Emily managed to call emergency services. "I only came for him," Marina says into the microphone. "The child is not to blame for the sins of his father." She exits through the back door as quietly as she entered and disappears into the darkness of the winter night a few minutes before the first police car arrives. Voiceover. 8 minutes after Emily's call, the first police officers arrive at the scene of the crime. But for Ryan Coleman, it's already too late. The camera shows the arrival of the police, their flashing lights painting the snow blue and red. Officers with their weapons at the ready enter the house, while others cordon off the perimeter. Soon, ambulances and forensic teams arrive. Detective James Harris arrives at the scene, a man in his 50s with an expressive, wrinkled face that speaks of decades of work with the Detroit Police Department. He gets out of an unremarkable sedan, pulling on his gloves and glancing at the crowd of neighbors gathered outside the house. 27 years on the Detroit Police Department, and every murder still gets to me, Harris says in a separate interview for the documentary. Especially in neighborhoods like this, where people think money can protect them from the cruelty of the world. Inside the house, Harris first goes to Emily and Chloe, who are being examined by paramedics in the living room. Emily is pale and shivering, despite the blanket on her shoulders. Chloe clings to her mother, too scared to cry. "Mrs. Coleman," Harris says gently to Emily, "I'm so sorry about what happened. I'm Detective James Harris, and I'll do everything I can to find the person who did this." Harris asks Emily a few basic questions. Did she see the attacker? Did she hear anything unusual before the shots? Did she know of any enemies her husband had? Emily answers no to all the questions, her voice trembling. "Ryan was a good man," she says. Who would want to kill him? The camera then cuts to Ryan's office, now a crime scene. Forensic investigators work methodically, photographing the body and bloodstains, collecting shell casings, and taking fingerprints. Harris carefully examines the room, noting the absence of signs of a struggle or robbery. "This was not a random crime," he comments. "The killer knew where he was going and who he was after." In the hours that follow, the police interview the neighbors. One of them, an elderly man who lives across the street, reports seeing a suspicious car parked near the Coleman home on Christmas Eve. He even wrote down the license plate number, which he found strange. "In a neighborhood like ours, you notice things that stand out," the neighbor explains. "An old sedan parked in the same spot for several days in a row definitely stands out." Voiceover. A neighbor's simple vigilance will be the first clue in a case that will soon capture the attention of all of Detroit. The next morning, news of Ryan Coleman's murder fills the local media. A successful businessman, philanthropist, and family man, he was shot dead in his own home on New Year's Day. Photos of Ryan at charity events, with his wife and daughter, interviews with his colleagues and friends, who are shocked by what has happened. The camera shows Marina watching the news in her room at the shelter. Her face is impassive, but her hands, holding a cup of coffee, tremble slightly. Next to her on the bed lies a bag, already packed for a quick departure. "They talk about him like he's a saint," she comments, looking at the TV screen. "No one knows the truth. No one knows what he did." Meanwhile, at the police station, Harris begins to gather information about Ryan Coleman's life. Officers review his business contacts, financial records, and history of conflicts. One of Harris's assistants finds a reference to Coleman's ex-wife, who served time for assault. "Marina Coleman," he reads from the file. "Released from prison 3 months ago after a 3-year sentence." Harris looks up from his notes. "Check her whereabouts on New Year's Eve." Parallel to the police investigation, the camera shows Alex, who has learned of the murder from the news. His face first shows disbelief, then growing anxiety as he recalls his last conversations with Marina. He tries to call her, but there is no answer. At the medical center, Alex looks through Marina's records, her comments during therapy sessions. Gradually, a picture forms in his mind: an HIV diagnosis, conversations about betrayal, hints of revenge. "I should have seen the signs," he says in an interview for the documentary, his face contorted with guilt. "They were right in front of me, her obsession, her anger, her despair, but I thought I could help her get through it, prevent it." Meanwhile, the police discover that the car with the license plate number recorded by the Coleman's neighbor is registered to a rental company. An employee of the company identifies Marina from a photograph as the woman who rented the car in December. Harris arranges for surveillance of the shelter where Marina lives and requests a warrant for her arrest. When the police enter her room, they discover that she has disappeared, leaving behind only a few personal items and burned documents in a trash can. "She planned this," Harris comments as he surveys the room. "And she knew we were coming." A full-scale search for Marina Coleman begins. Her photo appears in the news, on information boards, and on social media. The police check bus stations, airports, and roadside motels. At the same time, forensic experts analyze the evidence found in the Coleman home: partial fingerprints, fabric fibers, and shoe prints in the snow. Forensic experts confirm that the shots were fired at close range, indicating that the victim knew the killer. There are no signs of a struggle on Ryan's body. He did not expect the attack. "A classic case of premeditated murder," Harris explains in an interview. "Carefully planned, with a specific purpose. Such crimes are usually committed by people with personal motives." On the third day of the investigation, Harris receives interesting information from a colleague in the narcotics department. The weapon used to kill Ryan Coleman had previously appeared in a case involving illegal arms trafficking. The owner of a small gun shop on the outskirts of Detroit was under surveillance as a suspect in the sale of weapons without proper documentation. During questioning, The shop owner reluctantly admits that he sold a gun to a woman matching Marina's description shortly before Christmas. This information becomes further confirmation of her involvement in the murder. In search of additional information about the motives, Harris decides to talk to Alex Mitchell, whose name was found in Marina's medical records. The meeting takes place in Alex's office at the medical center. "Mr. Mitchell," Harris begins, watching the social worker's reaction closely. "What can you tell me about Marina Coleman?" Alex turns pale but maintains his professional composure. "She was my client. She was recently released from prison and was trying to get her life back on track." "And how was she doing?" Harris asks, taking out a notebook. "It was difficult," Alex admits. "She had trouble adjusting, finding a job. And then the diagnosis." "What diagnosis?" Alex hesitates, but realizes that this information may be important to the investigation. "HIV positive. She got it about a month ago." Harris makes a note. "How did she react?" "Like most people. Shock, denial, anger," Alex replies. But in her case, the anger was directed. "At whom?" "Her ex-husband. She believed he knew about his status and deliberately hid it from her." This information gives Harris pause. "Do you think she's capable of murder?" Alex is silent for a long time, struggling with professional ethics and civic duty. "I don't know. She's changed in recent weeks. She's become withdrawn, distant. There were moments when she talked about justice in a tone that sent a chill down my spine. But it's a long way from talk to action. Sometimes the line is very thin," Harris concludes, "especially when a person feels they have nothing to lose." After talking to Alex, the detective gains access to Ryan Coleman's medical records to verify Marina's version of events. To his surprise, he discovers that Ryan was indeed HIV positive and had known about his status for several years before marrying Marina. What's more, the medical records contain a note about a conversation during which the doctor strongly recommended that he disclose his status to his partner. "This changes the case," Harris tells his partner. "Now we have a motive, and a pretty strong one at that." On the 5th day of the investigation, information comes in from a roadside motel in northern Michigan. A woman matching Marina's description stayed there 2 days ago. By the time the police arrive, she has already left the motel, but surveillance cameras have recorded her face and the direction she was heading. "She's heading for the Canadian border," Harris concludes. "We need to step up surveillance at the checkpoints." At the same time, forensic experts confirm that the fingerprints found at the crime scene match Marina's fingerprints from the database of former prisoners. Now the police have enough evidence to issue a federal warrant for her arrest. Voiceover. In less than a week, the investigation of a crime that initially seemed mysterious has led to a clear suspect with an obvious motive. But for Detective Harris, the case became not just a matter of catching a criminal, but of understanding the human tragedy underlying the violence. In the final scene of the chapter, Harris sits at his desk late at night, reviewing the case files. In front of him are photographs: Ryan Coleman, successful and smiling, next to his wife and daughter; Marina Coleman, emaciated by years of imprisonment and illness; their wedding photo, found in the archives, where they both look happy and full of hope. "Sometimes in our work, there are no real winners," Harris says in a final interview. "Even when we catch her, and we will, it won't bring Ryan back to his family. It won't heal Marina. It won't undo years of pain and betrayal. But it will at least give everyone involved some semblance of closure." The phone on Harris's desk rings, interrupting his thoughts. He answers, his face becoming focused. "We found her," says the voice on the other end of the line. It is a windy January day at a checkpoint near the Canadian border. Border guards stop an elderly woman in a worn jacket who is trying to cross the border on foot away from the official crossing. A check of her documents reveals that she is Marina Coleman, a woman wanted for first-degree murder. A voiceover comments, "After a week on the run, Marina Coleman's journey ended 70 meters from what she thought was freedom." But true freedom turned out to be much more complicated than a geographical concept. The camera shows the moment of her arrest. Marina does not resist when the border guards handcuff her. Her face expresses not fear or anger, but a strange relief, as if she has completed a long, exhausting marathon. Detective Harris arrives at the scene 3 hours later. In the small interrogation room at the border crossing, he sits down opposite Marina. On the table between them is a folder with case materials, a glass of water, and a tape recorder. "You know why you're here," Harris says, more as a statement than a question. Marina nods. "I killed him." The simplicity of this confession catches the detective off guard. He turns on the tape recorder and reads Marina her rights. Then he asks if she wants to consult with a lawyer first. "I have nothing to hide," Marina replies. "I did what I had to do." Over the next hour, Marina tells her story: her marriage to Ryan, her arrest and imprisonment, her HIV diagnosis after her release, her discovery that Ryan knew about his status and hid it from her. She recounts everything methodically, almost detachedly, as if recounting someone else's fate. "I didn't intend to kill him at first," she admits. "I just wanted him to confess to Emily. I wanted him to take responsibility, at least to her. But the more I saw his life, perfect, successful, the clearer it became that he would never confess. He would lie again, evade responsibility again." Harris listens attentively, taking notes. "Do you understand that you have just confessed to premeditated murder?" Marina looks him straight in the eye. "I understand that I took justice into my own hands when the system failed to protect me or others." Voiceover. For Detective Harris, Marina Coleman's confession was both a professional victory and a moral dilemma. Legally, the case was clear: premeditated murder with aggravating circumstances. But the human tragedy underlying it had no clear resolution. 2 weeks after the arrest, the trial begins. Media interest in the case is enormous. The story of an HIV-positive ex-convict who killed a successful businessman who was once her husband attracts the attention of the entire state of Michigan. The motive for the murder, deliberate infection with HIV, causes a particular stir. The camera shows the courtroom filled with journalists and onlookers. Marina sits next to her court-appointed defense attorney, a tired, middle-aged man who looks as if he already knows the outcome of the case. On the other side of the courtroom is Emily, dressed all in black, her eyes swollen from crying. Her mother sits next to her, holding her hand. Chloe is not in the courtroom. It was decided to shield her from the trial. The prosecutor presents the case as a classic case of premeditated murder out of revenge. The evidence is irrefutable: fingerprints at the crime scene, witness testimony, the weapon found on Marina when she was arrested, and of course, her own confession. Marina's lawyer chooses an unusual defense strategy. He does not deny the fact of the murder, but appeals to the circumstances that led to it. He presents medical records confirming that Ryan knew about his HIV status before marrying Marina and deliberately concealed it. In some states, such actions are themselves a criminal offense. Miss Coleman was the victim of a crime whose consequences will haunt her for the rest of her life, the defense attorney argues. Her actions, while unacceptable, were the result of deep trauma and betrayal. The trial lasts only 3 days. On the third day, Marina is given the last word before sentencing. "I do not apologize for what I did," she says, standing before the court. "My only regret is that I hurt innocent people, Emily and especially Chloe. But Ryan was not innocent. He knowingly put my life at risk, and probably not just mine. The justice system did not protect me then. I do not expect it to protect me now." Voiceover. Cases involving intentional HIV infection remain among the most difficult in the legal system. They are treated differently in different states, ranging from serious criminal offenses to civil offenses. For Marina Coleman, this legal uncertainty was yet another manifestation of a system that failed to protect her. The verdict is handed down on the same day. The judge finds Marina guilty of first-degree murder, but takes into account mitigating circumstances, psychological trauma, health conditions, and the fact that the HIV infection was intentional. Instead of life imprisonment without the right to early release, Marina receives 25 years with the possibility of parole after 15 years. The law cannot sanction vigilante justice, no matter how fair it may seem to the perpetrator, says the judge, announcing the sentence. But the law must also recognize the complexity of human tragedies and seek a balance between justice and mercy. After the trial, the camera follows Emily as she leaves the courthouse under a barrage of questions from reporters. She silently gets into the car where her daughter is waiting for her. For a moment, the camera captures their faces through the car window. A mother and daughter whose lives have been destroyed by a crime whose roots lie in a past they knew nothing about. In the next scene, Marina is shown in a prison uniform in the visiting room of a women's correctional facility. Alex Mitchell sits opposite her. This is their first meeting since the arrest. "Are you here to tell me I should have chosen a different path?" Marina asks bluntly. Alex shakes his head. "I'm here to ask why you didn't let me help." In their short, tense conversation, there are no accusations or excuses, only a bitter awareness of missed opportunities. Alex admits that he feels guilty for not seeing the signs of the impending tragedy. Marina says she made her choice long before they met. "Some wounds are too deep to be healed by words or therapy," she says. "Sometimes the only cure is justice, even if the price is your own freedom." A voiceover comments, "The story of Marina and Ryan Coleman is not just a chronicle of a murder. It is a story about systemic problems that remain invisible until they lead to tragedy. About the stigmatization of former prisoners, which makes it difficult for them to reintegrate into society. About the lack of legal protection against the deliberate spread of dangerous diseases. It's about the human desire for justice, which can take destructive forms when official channels seem inaccessible." The final scene of the documentary is an interview with Alex 6 months after the verdict. He is working on a new program to support ex-convicts with chronic illnesses, inspired by Marina's story. "Could this tragedy have been prevented?" asks the voiceover. Alex stares into space for a long time before answering. "I want to believe that it could have been. If the justice system took crimes involving the deliberate transmission of HIV more seriously. If society didn't turn its back on ex-prisoners trying to build a new life. If we, as professionals, were better at recognizing the signs of psychological crisis. If." He falls silent, realizing he is sinking into an endless chain of hypothetical scenarios. "But I also believe that every tragedy can be a catalyst for change," he continues after a pause. "And if the story of Marina and Ryan makes even one person think about the consequences of their decisions, if it helps change even one law for the better, if it saves even one life, then perhaps their suffering was not in vain." The documentary ends with a quiet shot. Emily and Chloe at the cemetery, laying flowers on Ryan's grave. Nearby is the new house they moved into after the tragedy. In the background is a banner for the construction company that Emily decided to keep and run. Life goes on, carrying with it both memories of the past and hope for the future. A voiceover utters the final words. "Justice has many faces. For the law, it is punishment for a crime. For the victim, it is retribution for the pain caused. For society, it is the restoration of a disturbed balance. In the story of Marina Coleman and Ryan Coleman, all these faces of justice collide in a tragic conflict where there are no real winners, only survivors trying to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives."